Welcome to another episode of She's Evolving. I'm Elena, a medical endocrinologist, and I've spent the better part of my career and my own personal life navigating the intricate, sometimes messy, but ultimately fascinating world of female hormones. Today, we're diving into a topic that hits home for so many of us, our bodies after 40. It's a time of life that is often shrouded in mystery, whispered about in hushed tones, or worse, treated like a looming medical catastrophe. But here, we're going to look at it through a different lens. And I'm Julia, a clinical psychologist. My work focuses on the internal landscape of the mature woman, how we view ourselves, how we navigate our changing roles, and how we maintain our sense of self when the mirror starts reflecting someone we don't quite recognize yet. If you've ever looked at yourself and wondered, who is this new woman I'm becoming? Or if you felt like your emotions are on a roller coaster you didn't sign up for, you are in the right place. This isn't just about biology, it's about identity. Exactly, Julia. We want to strip away the alarmism. You won't hear us making magic promises about turning back the clock 20 years or selling you a miracle supplement that fixes everything overnight. What we will do is give you the honest, science-fact truth about what's happening in your body and how you can take the driver's seat in your own health journey. Before we get deep into the science and the soul-searching, we want to invite you to be part of this community. If you find this conversation helpful, please follow the She's Evolving podcast and share this episode with a friend. We're all in this together, and no woman should have to navigate the transition into her 40s and 50s feeling alone or confused. You know, Julia, before we get into the doctor talk, I want to share something personal. I remember the exact moment I realized my own hormones were shifting. I was at a medical conference, ironically enough, presenting a paper on metabolic health. I was 47. Suddenly, in the middle of a sentence, I felt this wave of heat. Not just I'm warm heat, but a volcanic surge starting from my chest and moving to my face. My heart started racing, and for a second, I felt a flash of genuine panic. As an endocrinologist, I knew exactly what it was. But as Elena, the woman, I felt completely betrayed by my own body. It was a baka, as we say, a real shock to the system. It's so powerful to hear you say that, Elena. Even with all your knowledge, the physical reality still felt like a betrayal. For me, it wasn't a hot flash that signaled the change. It was the invisibility and the sudden, unexplainable irritability. I remember standing in my kitchen, looking at a pile of laundry, and feeling a level of rage that was completely disproportionate to the situation. I felt like the old me, the patient, calm Julia, had checked out and left this stranger in her place. And then there's that feeling of looking in the mirror and seeing your mother's jawline, or noticing that your skin doesn't bounce back the way it used to. Many of my patients describe it as a mourning process. They are mourning the woman they used to be, and they don't know who the new one is yet. That invisibility you mentioned is such a profound psychological weight. And biologically, it's tied to the fact that for decades, our bodies have been governed by a very specific rhythmic dance of estrogen and progesterone. When that dance starts to change, when the music slows down or the beat becomes erratic, it affects everything. We aren't just losing the ability to reproduce, we are losing a primary chemical messenger that affects our brain, our heart, our bones, and our skin. And that's where the disconnect happens, isn't it? We're told it's just menopause, as if it's a single event like a birthday. But it's a long bridge. It's perimenopause, it's the transition, and it's the aftermath. My patients often feel gaslit by society, and sometimes even by their doctors, when they express that they just don't feel like themselves. They are told they are just stressed or that it's just part of aging. And that's exactly what we need to deconstruct. Let's talk about the why behind these feelings. After 40, our ovaries gradually begin to produce less estrogen. But it's not a straight line down, it's more like a jagged mountain range. One day your estrogen is sky high, the next it's in the basement. This fluctuation is what causes the brain fog, the night sweats, and the metabolic shifts. Estrogen is actually a metabolic hormone. It helps us manage insulin and keep our good cholesterol up. When it drops, our bodies start to store fat differently. usually around the midsection, which is incredibly frustrating for women who haven't changed their diet or exercise habits. I see the emotional fallout of that metabolic shift every day. A woman who has always been confident in her body suddenly feels like a stranger in her own skin. She feels puffy or heavy, and that feeds into a cycle of low self-esteem. And because her sleep is likely disrupted by those night sweats you mentioned, her emotional resilience is at an all-time low. It's a perfect storm. If you aren't sleeping, you can't regulate your emotions. If you can't regulate your emotions, your relationships suffer. And if your relationships suffer, you feel even more isolated. It's all connected. It's a feedback loop. And we haven't even mentioned cortisol, the stress hormone. As our sex hormones decline, our bodies become less resilient to stress. The things you could juggle in your 30s now feel like a crushing weight. High cortisol levels further drive that middle-age spread and make it even harder to sleep. So the first thing I tell my patients is, you aren't crazy and you aren't failing. Your internal chemistry is recalibrating. I love that word, recalibrating. It sounds so much more hopeful than declining. But Elena, let's tackle some of the things people are afraid to ask. I get this one all the time. Is it true that my libido is just gone forever after 50? There's the stereotype of the dry, uninterested older woman, and it terrifies people. That is one of the biggest myths out there. Does the libido change? Often yes. The drop in estrogen can lead to physical changes, like vaginal dryness, which makes sex uncomfortable. And the drop in testosterone, yes, women have testosterone too, can lower that initial drive. But change doesn't mean disappear. When we address the physical discomfort and look at the hormonal balance, many women find they have a more fulfilling sex life in their 50s because they are more comfortable in their own skin and more communicative with their partners. I agree completely. From a psychological perspective, libido is about more than just hormones. It's about connection, safety, and self-image. If you feel invisible or old, you aren't going to feel sexy. We have to re-signify what intimacy looks like. It might not be the spontaneous, fiery passion of your 20s, but it can be something deeper, more intentional, and ultimately more satisfying. It's about rediscovering pleasure in a body that is different, but still very much alive. Another myth I want to bust is the idea that you just have to white-knuckle it through the symptoms. There's this weird badge of honor some people wear about not taking any artificial help. Now look, hormone replacement therapy, HRT, isn't for everyone, and it's not a magic pill. But for many women, it is a life-changing tool that protects their bones, their brain, and their heart. We have to move away from the fear-mongering of the early 2000s and look at the modern science. It's about quality of life. And quality of life includes mental health. I often see women being prescribed antidepressants when what they actually need is hormonal support, or vice versa. It's not an either-or. Sometimes the best approach is a combination of talk therapy to navigate the identity shift and medical support to stabilize the biology. We need to stop treating the mind and body as separate entities. They are two sides of the same coin. Let's talk about energy for a moment, because that's the #1 complaint I hear. Elena, I'm just so tired. After 40, we have to be much more strategic about our energy. We can't run on fumes anymore. This means looking at muscle mass. Muscle is our metabolic engine. As we age, we naturally lose muscle, a process called sarcopenia. If you want your energy back, you have to lift things. You have to eat enough protein. You have to prioritize recovery. It's not about eating less and moving more in the way we were taught in the 90s. It's about eating better and moving smarter. That's such a vital point. And moving smarter also applies to our mental energy. This is the stage of life where many of us are sandwiched, caring for aging parents while still raising teenagers or supporting adult children, all while reaching the peak of our careers. We have to learn the power of the word no. We have to protect our peace as fiercely as we protect our health. Self-care isn't a luxury after 40, it's a survival strategy. It's about setting boundaries that allow our nervous systems to settle. I often tell my patients that their 40s and 50s are like a second puberty, but with a much better brain. During our first puberty, we were at the mercy of our hormones, and we didn't have the life experience to understand what was happening. Now we have the wisdom. We can observe our patterns. We can say, oh, I'm feeling anxious today, but I know my cycle is in its luteal phase, or I know my estrogen is dipping, so I'm going to be extra kind to myself today. That self-awareness is a superpower. It really is, and it's about changing the narrative. Instead of I'm losing my youth, what if we said I'm shedding the expectations of others? Many women find a tremendous sense of freedom in their 50s. They stop caring so much about the male gaze or societal standards of perfection and start focusing on what actually feels good. There's a psychological blooming that happens when you realize you don't have to please everyone anymore. I love that, a blooming. It reminds me of the Japanese concept of konenki, which refers to the menopausal transition. It doesn't just mean end of menstruation. It carries connotations of renewal and season of change. It's seen as a transition into a period of greater wisdom and social contribution. It's not a clinical ending, it's a cultural evolution.
We need more of that here. We are so obsessed with anti-aging that we miss the beauty of pro-aging. Pro-aging doesn't mean letting yourself bro. It means taking the best possible care of the version of yourself that exists right now. It means nourishing your body because you love it, not because you're trying to punish it into looking like it did at 25. Exactly. And that nourishment comes in many forms. It's the food we eat, focusing on anti-inflammatory whole foods that support our gut health, because our gut is where so many of our hormones are metabolized. It's the movement we choose, finding joy and strength and flexibility rather than just burning calories. And it's the sleep we prioritize, creating a sanctuary for our brains to wash away the toxins of the day. And let's not forget the emotional nourishment, surrounding yourself with women who uplift you, who are going through the same thing, and who can laugh with you about the absurdity of it all. Laughter is actually great for your hormones. It lowers cortisol and releases endorphins. We need to talk about these things openly. The chin hairs, the brain fog, the sudden desire to quit your job and move to the mountains, all of it. When we share our stories, the shame disappears. The shame does disappear in the light. I want to leave our listeners with a thought. Your body isn't failing you. It's communicating with you. It's asking for a different kind of care than it did 10 or 20 years ago. It's asking for more rest, more intentional movement, and more grace. When you listen to those cues instead of fighting them, that's when the magic, the real, sustainable kind, actually happens. And remember, you are not just a collection of symptoms. You are a whole person with a rich history and an even richer future. This transition is a doorway, not a wall. It's an invitation to reinvent your relationship with yourself, your health, and your purpose. You are evolving, and evolution is a beautiful, albeit sometimes uncomfortable, process.
As we wrap up today's conversation, I want to thank you for spending this time with us. Taking care of your hormonal health isn't about finding a fountain of youth. It's about building a foundation for a vibrant, energetic, and fulfilling second half of life. You have the power to influence how you feel, and it starts with understanding and compassion for yourself. If you felt a spark of connection today, please don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to She's Evolving on your favorite platform and share this episode with a woman in your life who might need to hear that she's not alone. We'd love to hear your thoughts and your stories. Reach out to us on social media, and let's keep this conversation going. Your body is changing, yes, but that change is not the end. It is a new, powerful beginning. You are becoming a version of yourself that is wiser, stronger, and more authentic. And we are right here with you, every step of the way. Keep evolving, keep questioning, and above all, keep being kind to the woman you are becoming. The acoustic guitar music returns, growing slightly louder and more upbeat. The sound of a gentle fade-out signifies the end of the episode. Until next time, take a deep breath, and remember, you've got this. See you in the next episode. You know, Julia, another thing I hear constantly, and this leads us right into some of the biggest myths we need to bust today, is the idea that once you hit 40 or 45, your metabolism simply breaks. Women come to me devastated, saying they are doing the exact same things they did at 30, but the scale won't budge. Or worse, the weight is shifting specifically to their midsection. They feel like their body is no longer their own.
And that's where the psychological tool really kicks in, Elena.
When a woman feels like she's lost control over her own physical form, it triggers a deep sense of anxiety. She starts to feel old in a way that feels permanent. I see women who become almost obsessive about their habits, or conversely, they just give up because they think, well, if my hormones are against me, what's the point? It's a very vulnerable place to be. Exactly. But the myth here is that it's broken. It's not broken, it's recalibrating. As estrogen drops, our bodies become more sensitive to insulin. We don't process sugars and starches the same way we used to. It's not a punishment, it's a signal to change the fuel. And then there's the myth of no pain, no gain. I see women in their late 40s doing grueling hour-long cardio sessions, which actually spikes their cortisol, the stress hormone. When cortisol is high, the body clings to fat for dear life because it thinks it's in a survival situation. Sometimes the best thing for your hormones after 40 isn't a harder workout. It's a longer sleep or a heavy lifting session that builds muscle, which is our metabolic currency. That is such a shift in perspective. It's about working with the body instead of fighting against it. And speaking of myths, we have to talk about the big one, the one that keeps so many women from seeking help, the fear of hormone replacement therapy, or HRT. There is so much hormone phobia out there, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. It's probably the biggest hurdle I face. Many women are still living under the shadow of a study from 20 years ago that was largely misinterpreted and caused a global panic. They think HRT is an automatic ticket to cancer or heart disease, but the science has evolved so much. For most healthy women entering perimenopause or menopause, the benefits of replacing those lost hormones for bone health, heart health, brain function, and overall quality of life far outweigh the risks. We use bioidentical options now that are much more aligned with what the body naturally produced. It's not magic, and it's not for everyone, but it shouldn't be a taboo topic. It's a tool in our toolkit, just like nutrition and stress management.
It's about informed choice, right? Not fear-based avoidance. And while we're on the topic of things people are afraid to talk about, let's talk about the dry spell myth. The idea that after 45 or 50, a woman's libido simply disappears and her sex life is effectively over. I have patients who are mourning their intimacy as if it's a death in the family.
It's a heartbreaking myth because it's so far from the truth. Yes, physiologically, the drop in estrogen and testosterone can make things different. There might be physical discomfort or a lower, spontaneous urge. But the libido isn't gone. It often just needs a different invitation.
I love that phrasing, a different invitation. In my practice, I tell women that sexual desire in your 50s isn't the same lightning bolt it was in your 20s. It becomes more about connection, communication, and often deliberate self-care. If you're exhausted, stressed, and feeling poorly about your body because of the hormonal shifts we've discussed, of course you won't feel in the mood. But when we address the physical side with you, Elena, and the emotional side with me, many women find that their intimacy actually becomes deeper and more fulfilling because they finally know who they are and what they actually want.
It's a rebirth in a way, but it requires us to stop looking at the 40s and 50s as a decline and start seeing them as a transition. Think about puberty. It was messy, it was emotional, our bodies changed in ways we didn't understand, and we were moody. Perimenopause is essentially puberty in reverse, but this time we have the wisdom of experience on our side. That's a powerful way to frame it. I often think about the brain fog too. That's a huge concern for the women I see. They worry they're developing early onset Alzheimer's because they can't find their keys or they forget a word in the middle of a meeting. The brain fog is very real, and it's hormonal. Our brains are loaded with estrogen receptors. When those levels fluctuate, the thermostat and the wiring of the brain can feel a bit glitchy. It's usually temporary and manageable, but the stress of worrying about it makes it 10 times worse. Exactly. The cortisol again. It all comes back to that balance. I think one of the most important things we can tell our listeners is that you aren't crazy, you aren't failing, and you aren't becoming invisible. You are simply in a state of high-level evolution.
I love that. She's evolving. It's the very heart of why we do this. As we move toward the end of our conversation today, Julia, I'm struck by how much of this comes down to grace. Giving ourselves the grace to move slower when we need to ask for help when the mood swings feel like too much, and to reject the societal narrative that says a woman's value is tied to her reproductive years.
You're so right, Elena.
Our value isn't in our hormones. Our hormones are just the chemistry that supports our journey. If you're listening to this and you feel like you've lost your spark, I want you to know that the spark is still there. It might just be under a bit of hormonal ash right now. By tending to your sleep, your nutrition, your boundaries, and yes, your medical health, you can blow those ashes away and find a flame that is steadier and brighter than the one you had in your 20s. That is a beautiful thought to leave our listeners with. This stage of life, this second spring, as some cultures call it, is an invitation to put yourself back on your own priority list. It's not about chasing youth, it's about owning your maturity and feeling vibrant in the body you have today. It truly is a new beginning. We've covered a lot today, from the science of estrogen to the psychology of self-image, but the most important takeaway is that you don't have to navigate this alone. There is so much support available, both medically and emotionally. Absolutely. Don't settle for, I guess this is just how it is now. If you're tired, if you're not sleeping, if your mood is heavy, reach out. Talk to a specialist who understands the 40-plus journey. You deserve to feel like the best version of yourself, not a shadow of who you used to be.
And remember, the conversation doesn't end here. We want to hear from you. What are you feeling? What myths have you been told? This community is about sharing our stories and lifting each other up as we evolve together. Thank you for joining us today on She's Evolving. It's been a joy to dive into these topics with you, Julia. Always a pleasure, Elena. And to our listeners, take a deep breath, be kind to yourself today, and remember that you are becoming something quite extraordinary. If this episode spoke to you, please share it with a friend who might need to hear that she's not alone. Subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss our next deep dive into the lives of women like us. Until next time, keep evolving, keep questioning, and above all, keep loving the woman you are becoming. We'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye for now, and take care of your heart and your hormones.